So new approach to lookout training here. This will be the Prairie Division basic lookout training. Pretty much could apply to anywhere, but it's kind of what we're plugged in for us. Um, Intent here is new lookout staffers can get an idea of what they're looking at and what they're supposed to be doing. Can refer back to this at any time, and our relief pool of people can also get a little knowledge base before they end up going up and staffing for a day or two. So this picture is actually from one of our lookouts. There was a mountain goat up there hanging out, and it kind of goes to show you never know what you might find up at a lookout. They're up there. The temps are cooler. It's still green most of the time, and you can't beat the view. Bring a book or a hobby. It can be a little slow, but remember you are there to look out for fires. So this is Pisgah Lookout back in 2006, I believe, Maxwell Fire. So lookouts they're up there. They're off the ground. You should not be afraid of heights. If you're afraid of heights, this is not something for you. This lookout isn't very tall, but it's still up off the ground a good 20 feet. Some safety notes. You don't want to climb on the rails or lean over it. Use both hands when you're climbing up the stairs, and when in doubt, face it like a ladder, especially with Wolf Mountain. It gets really steep on those stairs towards the top. Some are very tall. This would be Wolf Mountain. Um, the 100-foot tower, it does sway in the wind. The stairs I was referring to is that flight that are really more like a ladder than they are like a stair. Anyway, a little bit lookout towers. So there's limited power. You do have electricity, but there's not a lot of it. You can run lights, you can charge devices. Connectivity is usually good. You can see a cell tower on most of the towers. Well, on all of them. Sometimes that doesn't actually help you. There are laptops in the towers to run Dragon Plot, at least in the Ochoco National Forest towers. You can bring your own laptop as well. Of course, as far as connectivity goes, you might have to supply your own for anything significant. The Dragonplot towers or Dragonplot laptops are they come with an air card to use for those, but that belongs to the contractor. And can't really see it in this picture, but there are a couple of solar panels that hang off that south side of that lookout tower, and that's where we get power from. All that being said, we are looking for fires. Not necessarily like the one we saw on the second slide there, the big one right off the back of the tower, but we're looking for small ones. Some amount of vigilance is needed. You probably need to at least do a check every 10 minutes or so. At the same time, it can get kind of boring up there. So you need to take a little bit of time, read a book, do a craft, whatever, to keep yourself sane. And then every 10 minutes or so, do a good check or sweep to check for little fires. So how do I find those fires? How do I know what I'm looking at? How do I identify those locations? So as you're looking across a piece of ground, start picking out landmarks, especially landmarks you know. Take shots with the firefighter and confirm those locations. Get good with maps and just kind of learn how to use the basic geometry of maps and orienteering, and that'll help you a lot from the lookout. You take shots with your firefighter, confirm them, then look at the areas and landmarks you don't know, take shots with them, use your map to identify what they are. It's really good practice for finding a fire. Then you see a smoke out there and you can say, well, I know that this landmark is here on the map. I can kind of start correlating distances and figure things out. The measuring tape on the firefinder will help you to measure those distances until you start shooting off the scope of the firefinder, but that's okay. Also, we have Dragonplot to help you. But the underlying basics of it are I get an azimuth, which is an angle off of north, and I can draw a line on a map. Then I have to figure out distance, and I figure that out based on geography and topography that I see out there. Sometimes things get in the way of you seeing out of the lookout. In this case, I'm talking about cell phone towers. Yeah, it's hard to see through that. It's hard to take a shot through that. You can imagine your line going through there. The other option is your firefinder moves. You can slide it side to side a little bit or shift it from one rail to the next, and it doesn't change your functional observation location significantly, but it does get you around some of those objects. Okay, so we're still talking about locations, identifying locations from the lookout. Ultimately, that'll mean finding a smoke and telling me where it's at. But to start with, I'm just kind of locking down points and locations that I can see as I look out across this ground. The foreground's pretty easy. You know, I can pull out a map and I can see what's close around me. And really, even that mid-ground range, I can see a little more detail and I can define what things are. When I get out to distances, it gets pretty tricky. So use your known points and known locations. At least get a good azimuth. If you can get an azimuth on a fire, other lookouts can cross that azimuth with their own, and we can use that information to lock down that location. There can also be, large or even small blind spots, like behind ridges, where you can see a smoke, but you can't lock down a location. For example, right in front of this picture here, and this is from Aldrich Lookout, you have a ridgeline there, and if there's a smoke coming up from behind it, you know that there's a smoke coming up from behind it, but you can't really tell how far away it is until it starts to poke up into that ridgeline distance, which is a good like 6 miles out. So that's a lot of country that you're not really sure of. So when you get behind a ridge like that, you got a blind spot, your other lookouts can help you out a lot. Make note if that smoke is drifting. We'll show you a picture of that here in a little bit. But if your smoke's drifting, it could be coming up from a different azimuth than what you're pointing at. Keep that in mind. So for long distances, shooting way out there, and you will find fires way out on the horizon, way out there, and we care. We want to know. For those longer distances, you need to go to a bigger map. The map on your firefinder is probably not going to cut it. It's a little bit limited in distance, but the key is we are looking for any fire, any jurisdiction. We don't really care. Everything is covered by somebody that wants to know. Someone cares. So some agency is responsible for that, or some entity is responsible for that. So any fire you see, report it. Even if you can't lock down a location for me and you can give me an azimuth, we'll work with it and we'll figure it out. Be patient with your dispatchers. They don't understand that you can't always give them a specific location. So just explain to them, yeah, I cannot get you a location sometimes. And then when you're taking those long shots out there, you're looking for those prominent landmarks you can identify, and hopefully that can help you kind of lock that location in. So what's a smoke look like? We're looking for small fires, not big fires. Big fires are, of course, easier to see. But a little fire, note that little smoke in that picture puffing up from under the canopy. They're small. And this is a picture that's taken from quite close to that smoke, so it's even harder to see from the lookout. But with good optics, you can improve your probability. Note the color. There's a little bit of a blue tinge to that. That's pretty indicative of smoke burning in timber litter. And then any kind of behavior. So color's good. What color is it? Is it white? Is it blue? Is it brown? Is it black? Most of the time you're going to be looking at white or blue. Any kind of behavioral aspects that you can identify. If you can see trees torching or anything like that, that's good to report in your report. Last one was kind of a little blue puff. This one's more of like a small white column. Note how it's defined. It's got that really sharp edge to it, and and it really stands out against the hillside behind it. That's always really nice when it's not on or just over that ridgetop, and you have some contrast there. There's a little bit of blue to that probably, and it helps it stand out. It definitely stands out against that backdrop. You don't always get that lucky, but that's a good shot of a smoke, a fire. Okay, so this one's probably more like a medium column. Yeah, I'd call it a medium white column, and this is from inside the cab of the Lookout. And just to show you where it's at, I'm looking right there, and you'll train your eye to see these. That's a significant size fire. It's probably 3 to 5 acres, or it's some heavy fuels burning slowly. So that, decent sized fire there, a significant event. In this case, it happens to be part of a prescribed burn, but it so nicely showed up on a day that we happened to be in the tower, and I got a picture of it for this purpose. That's what I'm looking at there. And there's the same fire from outside, kind of pretty much dead center there. It's pretty broad at the base. It might even be bigger than that 5-acre prediction I currently had. Of course, it's part of a 1,000-acre burn, but that's kind of what smokes will start to look like. Think of those, but a little bit smaller, and that'll help you to, find them when you're looking around out there. That's a cool tower. Clouds and water dogs. You're going to have clouds. You're going to have water dogs. Water dogs are not puppies running around in the clouds around the Lookout. Water dogs are clouds and/or mist that looks like a fire. Especially after thunderstorms, you'll get clouds forming on the ground, and they look just like a smoke. And even experienced lookouts with years of experience, with decades of experience, still occasionally call in water dogs as smokes. It happens. So it will happen to you, and you will start to understand what those look like. Remember, after it rains, after you get a thunderstorm, the first thing you usually see are water dogs, and you'll see smokes pretty soon afterwards. And that's just kind of a general statement. That's not always the way it works. With clouds and water dogs, the color is white to gray. And that's not usually the color of smoke, but boy, it's hard to tell the difference. And if you can compare them to a known fire, it's fairly easy to differentiate them. If you're looking at a fire from an hour before and you're wondering about what may be a water dog, that color will really stand out when you can compare them. The color is generally off a bit on water dogs. It just doesn't quite look like a smoke, and you'll wonder. 99% of the time, if I'm not sure, it's a water dog. And that's a quote from a lookout who's got decades of experience. It's always after a storm. You're paying close attention because you just got lightning. You're probably a little excited. And they show up. So I think the key is usually after a storm, it rained a little, and that's why you're getting water dogs. You have some time. Watch it for a little bit and see what it does. If it gets big and then moves around a lot, it's probably a water dog. So on this one, what do you think? Smoke or a dog? In this case, it happens to be smoke. I can tell mostly because of the color, but the fact that it's kind of strung out on the ridge there doesn't help. But I was going for whatever pictures of smoke I could find. So typically when you see more than one in one area, it's going to be a water dog. The color is a little bit blue, and it goes into and under that canopy, which can be kind of hard to see from the lookout, but that's a good indicator. Watch it for a while. Wet conditions, fires don't get big fast, but water dogs get big and they move around on you. Okay, so this is a bigger fire, but the point of this picture is see how the smoke drifts. If your lookout is on the back side of that ridge and you're looking at this fire, um, you're not necessarily seeing the base of the fire, you're seeing where the smoke comes up. So if there's wind on that fire, your smoke could be coming up quite a ways to the side of where the fire is actually at. And where that makes a difference is when I'm looking for a small fire and you shoot an azimuth line on it, and if the smoke is drifting, your azimuth could be off and I may have trouble finding that fire for a while. So keep that in mind when people are having trouble finding the fire that you called in. In this case, you can't see the base because you're on the other side of the ridge. If you can see the base, we typically know that your azimuth should be pretty well dead on. This is a firefinder. Um, it has a map mounted in the center. Mounted in the center. Yeah, mounted in the center. And the center of that map is your lookout. That's a tape that measures distance that runs across the center, and that's kind of your azimuth line. And then the sights are on both ends. You can only see the forward sight in this one, but you look through a little peephole in the back. And these are parts and pieces. Note how it says the front sight. That's going to have little crosshairs, usually made out of horsehair, tied in there. You got a base map, your ring that rotates around. That thing moves. The azimuth graduations are on the base, not on the ring that moves. Shows you the leveling screws. I'm sticking to the bottom of the picture there. The tracks are sliding. That's what I was talking about to move around an object that's in your way. If you have a tower outside or a tree or the post of the corner of the cab or something, you need to slide that thing over or move from rail to rail to get around it. Back up to the top, I'm looking at the rear sight. The rear sight's going to be what you look through. And that sliding peephole sight can help you get some angles, but we have another tool for those angles that's more accurate. We actually have a rifle scope mounted on most of the firefinders. There's your handle for turning, upper plate, and that's what slides around. Okay, I think that's good for now. The rest of it could probably do better looking at the firefinder itself. So when you report a fire, I actually have a document that you can use. But these are the things that you want to report a fire. So I would call my dispatch center, dispatch this is whatever lookout, and then you tell them you have a smoke report. And as soon as they get their paperwork squared away or their computer fired up appropriately, they'll say, go ahead with your smoke report. You want to give them the azimuth to the smoke. That'll be in degrees. You can break that down into minutes, but it's probably not that useful for anybody but you, the lookout that has Dragonplot. Maybe the 30-second mark, and those are all attainable from the firefinder. We'll teach you how to do that. And you want to tell them if the base is sighted, yes or no. And that means, can you see the base of the fire, or is it behind a ridge, coming up from behind the ridge? Give a location by landmark if it's near some landmark that you're aware of, and try and keep those landmarks to major landmarks that you're hearing people talk about. Some obscure reservoir out in the middle of the forest probably isn't nearly that handy. The main idea there is if I'm headed to that fire, I can drive towards that landmark and I don't have to pull my map out until I get a little bit closer. So it's a convenience thing if nothing else. And we're looking for legal locations. Some lookouts in some places of the world go by distance or coordinates or something. We do legals here. Legals are how we read our map, and I'll add in something on how to do legals. give me the size of the fire, small, medium, or large. And again, that takes time to learn what a small fire looks like versus a medium fire versus a large fire. But and that'll come with time. But try to give me a size, give me color. You see the options there. Most of the time they'll be blue and white. Activity, if you can tell if it's running or creeping or puffing, if it's light and wispy. Those are all things that are good to know, but not critical. If you can't tell, if you don't know if it's running or creeping, don't say anything. That's okay. We'll figure it out. We'll go fight fire. It'll be fine. And then some optional stuff. Wind, like direction, is probably the first thing to start with if you can get direction. And remember, wind direction is always the direction it's coming from. So a north wind is blowing out of the north. A south wind is blowing out of the south, which would make my smoke go the opposite direction. And you probably won't be able to tell the amount of wind until you start to get some more experience with it. Rain or dry can be nice, especially in thunderstorms. Is it inside the rain shadow from the thunder cell or not? You may not be able to tell. If it's a really steep slope and it looks like it's really steep, that's great. I'd like to know that. If you can tell. Fuels can be useful sometimes, if it's in scattered juniper or timber or on a scab, that just helps me lock down that location when I'm out there looking for it. And we'll practice that. Radios, we report everything by radio, and the idea there is mostly that everybody can hear it, and everybody knows what's going on. So a little bit better situational awareness for the entire world around us. We have several command frequencies. We have 3 command frequencies, one on the east side of the forest for the Ochoco, for the Prairie Division, one in the middle and one on the west side. And each of those frequencies has repeaters. The radio repeaters that you talk on, your radio sends out a signal and it bounces off one of these repeaters. So on the east side, my radio can bounce off Aldrich or it can bounce off Wolf Mountain, and then it goes down to, it goes out and whoever can hear it picks it up. It also goes into our dispatch center from there. So those are my main command frequencies. That's generally where you're going to report fires to. If you are reporting fires, keep them on those frequencies. That way everybody can hear it. You start to get to these other frequencies and not everybody hears them. So TAC frequencies are line of sight only. You can hear them because you're on a lookout, which happens to have a repeater next to it. And so you can hear lots. People on the ground can't hear everything that you can hear. So when you're using TAC frequencies, if you were talking to an engine or a resource that was responding to a fire and kind of helping them work into it, TAC frequencies are great because dispatch isn't hearing it, the office isn't hearing it. Not everybody in the world is hearing that conversation, and they don't necessarily need to. They need to know when it's reported, that initial report. After that, if you're working with an engine, you can go to a TAC frequency and have a conversation about what they see, and they can help you help them get to the fire. TAC frequencies are pretty common. You'll use those a lot. Air to ground, a lot fewer times that you're actually going to use an air to ground frequency. But if you were talking to an air attack for some reason, you would probably go to air to ground. If you were having more than a quick conversation with a recon plane, you'd probably go to air to ground. And generally, they'll come up on the command frequency and ask you to go to air to ground. We have our primary frequencies for our zone, which is interagency, and then we also have cooperators. So for a lot of our fires, a lot of our lookouts, not a big deal. Mostly they stay on our main base frequencies. Aldrich specifically, occasionally Pisgah, will end up using some of the ODF frequencies out of John Day just to go direct to those dispatch centers to report fires and or cross shots. And that can be really helpful to those adjacent agencies, which just so happens that we sit along an edge and we border somebody else that dispatches out of a different location. All of which is something we'll have to go into a little more detail later.